We all know many New Mexico families are struggling. Our state has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, particularly for children. According to the national organization Feeding America, about 17% of families in New Mexico experience food insecurity. That means they don't know where their next meal will come from. Now, during the school year, kids can get breakfast and lunch through the free and reduced meal program at schools, but in the summer, it can be challenging to reach those children. Producer Sarah Gustava sat down recently with local leaders to talk about hunger during the summer months.
The summer break can be stressful for families, particularly if that means finding money for meals that are usually provided at school during the year. We wanted to know more about how this might impact young people in our state. I'm joined today by Patty Keene from the UNM Prevention Research Center. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Alyssa Barnes is Director of Community Initiatives at Roadrunner Food Bank. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Jill Dixon is Director of Development for the Food Depot in Santa Fe. Thank you.
We appreciate being here.
Also, Emiliano Perea is Program Manager for the New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department, or CYFD. Glad to have you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm honored.
Patty, I want to start with you. You're also a registered dietitian. How might missing meals impact a child's growth and development? What's at stake here?
So we know that food insecurity, so really what we're talking about, food insecurity has several detrimental impacts across the lifespan, and particularly in childhood in these sort of very critical developmental stages. And so we know in infants and toddlers, they have higher risk for iron deficiency anemia. There's cognitive deficiencies that we see in children with food insecurity. Other health impacts, they tend to have higher rates of asthma. And then also they have extensive behavioral problems in school. They tend to have higher anxiety, higher rates of depression. They tend to have lower math scores and difficulty getting along with their peers, et cetera. So it really, it covers this broad range of impacts. So health impacts, cognitive impacts, academic impacts. So it's a tremendous concern. There are also, when we talk about sort of overall food security, but then also when we sort of drill down a little bit more into dietary quality, oftentimes low-income households have reduced dietary quality. They have reduced levels of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, meats, dairy, all those things that for a lot of us we sort of take for granted having access to those.
Alyssa, you're looking at the gap between what's happening for students during the school year and then what happens in the summer when these meals are not available for children. What do we know now? Are kids not eating during the day if they don't have those meals from school?
It's a really good question. We know anecdotally that when summer is the hungriest time for families with kids. We know that when they are not in school getting those free or reduced breakfast and lunch, that families are either skipping meals or they're having to stretch their resources even further than what they were doing during the school year to make sure their kids are getting those 3 meals a day plus however many snacks. And depending on the age of the child, those meals and snacks can get pretty big. So there are a lot of different programs around the city and around the state that are working on addressing summer-specific sites, but the gap is still really wide.
Yeah. Emiliano, how do programs through CYFD address this need around the state?
Well, our programs in our department, just like Alyssa said, focus on the summertime, specifically the summer food service program, so we can bridge that nutrition gap, provide those meals that are that they need in the summertime so badly, because they don't have that access to the free and reduced breakfast, as she mentioned. As for the CACFP program, that provides meals more on a year-round basis for children and youth that are in a care setting. However, it's very similar in that those families that we're providing meals to the children for, they're struggling families. And we document that by obtaining income and family size data, so we know that these families are the ones that we need to target.
Yeah. And are they particularly rural? Is there a difference in urban and rural need right now?
You know, a hungry kid is a hungry kid, no matter where you might find them. I think what complicates things the most is the rural settings, and specifically the food deserts that we have around the state. I mean, we have one right next door here in Torrance County. That's what makes it very, very difficult, or more so difficult, for children and families in rural areas compared to, for example, here in the metro.
Food deserts are places where there's not a grocery store easily accessible for families.
That's correct.
And I imagine, the saddest thing too is that there might be a kid sitting at home hungry that can't get to a place where they can get a meal. Is that happening?
Yes, ma'am. Access is a big thing. We have 700 sites around the state, but despite that high number, and because New Mexico is so rural, there is many circumstances where kids cannot make it to the meal site. There's a provision in summer food that allows us to take meals to the kids, but everything needs to be paid underneath that one rate per meal. And here in New Mexico, oftentimes we have to transport meals great distances, and what the sponsoring organizations find is that reimbursement rate is insufficient in covering those mileage costs.
I see everyone on the table nodding their head here. Jill, are food banks like the Food Depot able to address some of this, able to help families during the summer? What does that look like for you?
I think we're making some headway, and Roadrunner would agree with that. I'm sure that we do have some programs in place. Like Emiliano mentioned, there are some programs. We have a Lunchbox Express that's bringing meals directly into the children's communities, so it's eliminating the need for that transportation piece. So if a child maybe can't get to one of those summer sites, right there in their own mobile home park or apartment complex, the meals are coming to them, which is a really great way to bridge that gap. But right now that's happening in Santa Fe, which isn't necessarily a food desert. So when you're looking at the transportation issue of getting out into the depths of Rio Arriba County, out in Vallecitos and El Rito, you're talking about places that are 40, 50 miles from a grocery store or any kind of hub. And there's issues around food safety of a prepared meal being transported that far and still being safe to consume. And that speaks to the nutritional piece of things. You want a prepared meal more than you want a shelf-stable one because it's more nutritious. So there's a lot of challenges around doing this work better. I think we're making a lot of headway. We're piloting some programs that have the potential for huge success, but a lot of the rural communities are really struggling with infrastructure issues. There may not be other nonprofits, there may not be volunteers to support the delivery of those meals, there may not be a proper venue. And in those areas, we're also seeing a higher number of grandparents raising grandchildren, which compounds the whole issue. So then
How so?
Well, you have a senior, first of all, that's on a fixed income. They plan to retire. Now they're raising children on that fixed income, so their SNAP eligibility may not be as high as it could be otherwise, so they may not get as much food in the household. But you're also looking at transportation issues that come with seniors. They tend not to drive as often or in the evenings. So the access issues are compounded by the fact that you've got seniors caring for their grandchildren.
Yeah.
Well, what you often end up with is two vulnerable populations in the home.
Exactly.
So we know that, children and seniors tend to be more vulnerable in terms of health, in terms of their nutritional needs. And so when you have grandparents raising grandchildren, you're serving two different vulnerable populations at the same time.
I think the latest statistics in Espanola was that 60% of the children in Espanola schools are being raised by grandparents.
Yeah, that's right.
So in the rural areas we're serving, it's a huge issue.
Alyssa, there's a lot of talk about changes to the SNAP program. What would that mean for the folks that you serve?
Sure. So any changes to federal nutrition safety net programs affect the food lines across all of the programs that serve. One of the interesting things about SNAP is that the entire food bank network across the country, which is over 200 food banks, only provides 1/10 of the amount of meals as the SNAP program does. So if the SNAP program was cut by 10%, the food bank network would have to double its distribution. To put that in context for the state of New Mexico, the food bank network distributes 32 million pounds of food every year. So we would have to jump that up to 64 million pounds of food. We don't have that much food to rescue and distribute. And so our lines would grow and we would not be able to meet those needs.
Because you're getting those foods through donations, or you're taking financial donations and going to Costco and buying food? What does that look like?
That's a really good question. The food bank network primarily acts as food rescue. So a majority of that 32 million pounds is picked up from retail stores. sorted at the food banks, and then redistributed. Very little of what we distribute is food that we are going out and purchasing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Patty, all of this in the context of, when we're talking about rural areas and there being transportation issues and all these concerns, there's also limited access to health care. There's not enough doctors in rural areas. And how does that also play into these conversations about nutrition for kids and families?
Well, and I think I'm glad you asked that, because really when I think about these programs are really about prevention, right? They're really about primary prevention of chronic disease. I mean, when we really look at, because we know food insecure families, food insecure adults are at much higher risk for chronic disease, nutrition-related chronic disease. We have 40% of New Mexicans have prediabetes, and only 1 out of 10 of them know it. And so when we're talking about prevention, providing healthy meals, having nutrition standards in school lunch programs, in the summer food service program, it's really about being able to have and provide those high quality foods that kids are likely not getting at home. So it's really, in that way, it's sort of that first line of defense for, because there are access issues in terms of healthcare. But the other thing I wanted to sort of highlight, and I'm glad you mentioned that about grandparents raising grandchildren, because there's lots of issues there around nutrition. But one of the things that we also know when we're talking about screening for food insecurity, adults will always make sure children are fed. And so you may be just looking at and screening the kid and the child, but sort of leaving that adult out and not necessarily checking in. And so when we think about in the summer, when suddenly children are home and they need 2 more meals at home than they didn't need for the other 9 months out of the year, that's incredibly impactful to a household budget. And so we already know that food insecure families are not getting, are offsetting, in order to pay for medication or for their heating bill or to cool their house or whatever it might be, that there's so many things that compete with those food dollars. And so I think that's the other thing that sometimes we forget about is that what that jump in the summer really means for families.
Emiliana, I want to end with you. We talked a little about Cuts to SNAP, what that might mean for organizations that provide food for folks. But what about with the state looking at potential changes from the federal government? If there's a cut in funding, what will that mean for the services that you're able to provide?
Well, I would definitely expect for our services to be, a greater need for them. It's hard to translate into what that might look like, but I mean, theoretically, one would think that, if we're not getting as much SNAP entitlement or foods into the household, well, we have to search for it somewhere else, which is going to be through the summer food service program. But it's very difficult to gauge what that might translate into in terms of real numbers.
But there is definitely a need around the state. And I appreciate all of you giving us an introduction right now. I know there's so much more to talk about. We'd like to ask all of you to provide us with some resources that we can put up on our website for folks at NewMexicoInFocus.org. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.